Among its forests, seas, and plains, Europe's wilderness is home to some of the continent's rarest and most endangered species. This series takes you to its remotest corners to show you its incredible natural diversity. Extinct in Europe after the last ice age, Scandinavia is now home to a small number of muskoxen again today. In the far north, in Norway's Dovrefjell National Park and in the area around the Swedish border, these huge mammals, closely related to goats, brave tough conditions. Will they be able to hold on to this habitat in the future? The mighty Scandinavian mountains make up the longest mountain range in Europe. Their rounded peaks, shaped by ice and glaciers, extend up to the continent's northernmost coast. Their remote inland landscape offers plenty of space for Europe's only muskox population. The bulls are of considerable size. In summer, they attach themselves to a herd of cows. Muskoxen are ruminant animals and more closely related to goats than cows. The herd spends its day alternating between grazing and resting. A baby was born in the spring. It still stays close to its mother and uses her fur to keep warm. The bulls are easy to spot. Their horns are considerably longer and thicker than those of the females. These animals owe their name to a smell that the bulls secrete in the mating season, which is reminiscent of the smell of musk deer, whose glands are used to make perfume. A mane-like hide is characteristic for the muskox. Its hair can grow up to 60 centimeters in length. A fully grown bull weighs in at around 400 kilograms and can sprint at speeds of up to 60 kilometers an hour. Dovrefjell is one of 47 national parks in Norway. Fjell means mountain, and in Scandinavia's mountainous region is used to refer to areas above the tree line. At the foot of the steep slopes, tundra-like plains stretch out, covered with dense vegetation. An excellent source of food for these large animals, who particularly love willow and birch shrubs. Tord Breton works for the environmental agency here and has special responsibility for the muskoxen of Dovrefjell. He looks after their well-being and knows where they most like to spend their time. Twice a year, he combs the mountain to find and count them, a kind of census for oxen.
Today we are counting the calves. We want to know how many were born this year. In a normal year, 6 out of 10 cows have calves. It is very important for us to know if the population is rising or falling.
Tord has a long journey ahead of him. The oxen are spread out over an area of more than 400 kilometers squared.
There are lots of summer meadows where we hope to find a few muskoxen. We know that we have 200 fully grown animals plus their calves. This means we have 200 to 300 oxen here in total.
The population in Norway is closely observed. After all, it has not been that long since muskoxen came back here at all. The animals which now call Norway home were brought to Norway from Greenland around 100 years ago. Their meat and wool were highly sought after, and there was a desire to return this native species to the country. Musk oxen lived in Europe during the last ice age, when they roamed all over the continent like mammoths. When the climate began to warm 11,000 years ago, bringing the ice age to an end, they vanished from the continent. The bones of an ice age muskox were found in Dovrefjell National Park, which is why it was chosen for their reintroduction. The population has grown to around 200 since then, more than enough for now. There is a strict population management plan in place. Tord is responsible for making sure it is stuck to, which is why he spends so much time monitoring the animals.
Here we have muskox winter dung, little pellets, which they excrete in winter. A nice small pile, this one. You can see that this is winter dung because in the summer their pat is much bigger. This is from the winter. It is probably because of the amount of fiber in their diet. This leads to the small pellets. This is true for all deer species and ruminant animals. You get small pellets in winter and big pats in summer.
The muskox diet varies according to the season. In winter, the hunt for food is exhausting. For the reindeer, too, this is a tough time of year. They use their long legs to dig for lichen in the snow. Muskoxen mainly eat grass that pokes out of the snow. Nonetheless, if winter gets warmer, it could be disastrous for them.
In 2012, it rained at the end of December, and that led to a layer of ice forming over the meadows where the muskoxen feed. It stayed until March. We observed that they tried to break through the ice to get at their food. This will become a problem across the Arctic if the winters get mild and it rains because the pastures freeze. This means no food for the grazers.
It is particularly important for the smallest in the herd to eat enough in the summer so that they have enough energy reserves for winter. It is early morning in neighboring Sweden. Härjedaalen is a sparsely populated province on the Norwegian border. At lower altitudes, its landscape is covered with taiga-like forest. In the west, the huge Scandinavian mountains rise up. In the 70s, a small herd of Norwegian muskoxen separated themselves from the rest of the population and settled here, 150 kilometers away. They have roamed around the Swedish wilderness ever since. Deep in the forest, an area has been created for muskoxen conservation. In this park, 7 animals live across 16 hectares. The park is open to visitors, but is mainly used for breeding. These youngsters will be released into the wild later in order to boost the genetic variety of the wild herd. This family is still together. The youngster was born 2 weeks ago and follows its mother wherever she goes. Ida Naslund works in the park and monitors the oxen every morning. She knows all their names and personalities.
Kom där. Du är ju för snäll du.
We have a bull in here, Compass, the father, who is always a bit grumpy, but this is what muskoxen are meant to be like. Here we have a bullock, his son, Embel. He's very cautious. He prefers to wait things out, has a bit of a curiosity, but is mainly cautious. So here are 2 very different personalities.
Ida can see if everything is okay from their behavior and expressions. However, the animals are not meant to get too close to humans in their large enclosure. They need to maintain their natural instincts and pass them on to their young.
Embl is 2 years old and is right on the verge of becoming mature. He is very hormonal and is learning what Compass, a fully grown bull, does. This is finishing school for a muskox bull.
Embl is learning how to deposit his scent on trees during mating season. There are glands in their eyes which secrete their scent through friction. In order to keep tabs on mating, bulls and cows are kept in separate enclosures. But Compass still wants to keep in contact with the ladies.
It sounds a bit like a lion or a bear. We call it roaring. It comes from the chest. He's saying to females, "Here I am, are you impressed?"
However, Compass will have to stay patient. The authorities have decided not to allow any releases this year, so the animals will stay in their separate enclosures. Ida takes notes every day on the oxen's behavior, the weather conditions, and their eating habits. She collects data which are essential for a successful breeding and maintenance program over a long period of time.
All parks like ours have 3 priorities. We want to educate people, to spread knowledge about animals and their position in the world. We want to carry out breeding to keep species going. And number 3, we want to carry out research.
Ida is doing her bit to protect muskoxen all over the world. A herd is made up of several cows and their youngsters. Each one can be made up of up to 20 oxen. The young bulls leave the herd when they reach 4 years old. They are then on their own, except during the mating season, which begins in July. The bulls fight to establish their dominance. They begin with a few threatening feints before the fight begins in earnest, with their horns coming into play. Males are often injured and occasionally even killed in these battles. The winner becomes the dominant bull to a herd. By pulling back his lips, he can smell when a cow's sexual hormones are ready for mating. It can take several weeks for mating to begin, and it is always the cow's decision. The calves are born in spring, when there is plenty of food. Cows look after the young until they are pregnant again. A calf only weighs about 15 kilograms at birth. It will then suckle its mother for a year before starting to graze. They only achieve full size between the ages of 4 and 6. Cars are banned in the Dovrefjell National Park. In order to protect the animals, there is just one shuttle bus to take visitors up to the high mountains. Floris Smits is a guide here. Normally, he takes photographers around to find the muskoxen. Today, he is out alone to track them and take some photos. he has received a tip-off about where one herd is.
So at the moment there is a small family group of muskox close to Snøheimen, and the weather cleared, and we have actually a good view to the surrounding mountains, which we haven't had in the last few days. So this gives a nice opportunity to photograph the muskox with the nice mountains in the background.
His goal is the region around Snøhetta, the highest peak in the national park. There is a small herd grazing just below it. The mountain is 2,200 meters high. At this altitude, the landscape is rugged and untamed. Floris came to Norway from the Netherlands a few years ago to study. Enthralled by the remote wilderness and this unique habitat, he decided to stay. Nowadays, he spends most of his time with the muskoxen. He has found the herd.
So if the animal which I think, which is a big bull, is a big bull, that means that the family group feels more safe. But you always have to see how they react, because sometimes they still can be skittish when there's a big bull. So we always approach slowly, and we always approach in the open, so they can see us coming on a long distance.
The young ones still need to learn how to defend themselves when faced by danger. Muskoxen have few natural predators. Only packs of wolves represent a real threat to them. If they sense danger, they surround the smallest and weakest. The stronger animals form a ring with their horns pointing outward. This phalanx formation allows them to defend themselves from enemies. The herd is not afraid of Floris.
With the muskox, you don't necessarily need to be very patient to find them, but they are very, very, I would not say lazy animals, but they like to lay around, they like to take their time, and they save their energy by taking it calm. So sometimes you have to be very patient. You can sit for hours waiting for them to stand up.
Something is up. The herd suddenly begins to move.
I don't know why these animals decided to move away. It was clear nothing scared them. They just started to move in a certain direction, and they're moving against the wind. So it could be that they've smelled maybe a big bull, a dominant bull, which they want to investigate.
He won't get a decent photo now.
When you work with nature photography, you can never expect anything. Everything is a surprise, and nature will do what nature does. So today they decided to move away to a different area, and in the end it's about being outside, enjoying nature.
Only a very few mammals can survive a Nordic winter and its harsh conditions. Dovrefjell is also home to wild reindeer, a rarity in Norway where most reindeer live in the north and have been domesticated. Once upon a time, wild reindeer were spread all over the country, but intensive hunting has now forced them into the mountains in the middle of the country. Dovrefjell's mountains are some of the highest in Norway. Their northerly location and high altitude air mean they have an Arctic climate. Tord Breton knows the lay of the land well. He inherited his job as muskoxen manager from his father and spent his childhood pursuing them through the mountains.
A muskoxen herd is not a permanent arrangement. The herd will form and then break up into different formations, often. Just before mating, a male will try to secure as many cows as possible. This one here has 3 cows, and he will try to make sure that no one else comes and takes them from him. He is not very big, though, so this could be tricky. He is not big enough to fight off another fully grown bull.
Tord has worked out which herd this is and counted the calves. The youngsters can communicate with their mothers from quite a distance.
Little calves often look for their mothers. That's the sound they make. I spend a lot of time outside, and it really is a wonderful job where you get to follow these animals. It is quite a small population in a small area, so it is relatively easy to keep an eye on their numbers. That makes it really great.
Human beings have been keeping the population under control since the 80s. It should not be allowed to exceed more than 200 animals in total. This is because there are more and more outbreaks of illness, and the larger the population, the quicker things can spread. As soon as a dead animal is found, Tord checks the area around it.
All animal populations get illnesses, but a species which has been here for thousands of years is used to the bacteria which are present in the area. The muskox was only reintroduced 100 years ago, and before that lived elsewhere in a place where they did not have much contact with other mammals. They are therefore at a high risk of disease and don't have a well-trained immune system. This is the carcass of a fully grown cow. Not very old, 3 or 4 perhaps. Her forehead is not yet fully developed. She died in winter. You can see the winter wool here. Her jaw is fully developed, so she was probably at least 4 years old.
In this case, Tord is unable to establish the exact cause of death. The muskoxen in Norway originally come from Greenland. That is where they survived after the end of the last ice age. It is a habitat they share with just a few other mammals like the wolf, the Arctic fox, and the polar bear. The majority of the world's 170,000 muskoxen still live in Greenland and Canada. In Norway, the small number of muskoxen have become a tourist attraction. Floris is setting off for another attempt today. Down in the valley, it is reasonably warm in the summer, and the meadows hum with life. Floris sets off from here into a birch forest. Their buds and leaves are a popular food for the muskoxen.
The muskox, they are very skilled with their lips. And especially in the winter, it's very useful for plucking as much as possible grass, which is growing between the snow without all the time also eating the snow. And now, during late summer and autumn, when they start to feed more on the leaves, you can see them with their lips taking the branch and either strip some of the leaves off and eat them, or in some cases they are taking individual leaves and eating them.
The mountain-loving fjell birch only grows in the far north. Because of the short summers and the nutrient-poor soil, they never get very tall. They are a common tree in the fjell landscape, however, and shape its appearances around the tree line. which is at an altitude of about 1,100 meters in Norway. Having got to the top, Floris finds a herd of muskoxen. Up here on the plateau, they are tucking into some tasty scrub vegetation.
One, two, three, four, five. I can see 5 packs of muskox feeding in the willows just behind the hill. There could be more because they are so hidden. And this is an area with a lot of vegetation, a lot of willow, and the muskox really like to hang out in this time of the year here because there is a high abundance of food.
Muskoxen are ruminant animals. This means they first swallow their leaves and grass whole. Only then, after a pre-digestive phase, do they begin to chew. The herd makes itself at home up here. They decide together when to begin and end periods of grazing and resting. The herd is so busy grazing that they do not run away this time. However, they are not giving Floris much to work with. He wants to wait and see if they begin to move later. Their tracks are everywhere here.
You can see the trail they are frequently using, so they just walked here and these dead twigs collected some of the fur. It's very, very soft, very warm. When they are going to their winter habitat, to their summer habitat, to the calving area, they often use the same paths, the same trails.
Floris decides to spend an evening up in the mountains and only head home tomorrow morning. In the summer, the sun is still high in the sky late in the evening.
The Nordic countries are perfect for nature photography because of the light conditions. During the summer, you have the long nights with perfect light. And during the winter, the sun doesn't come that high above the horizon, so you never have too hard light. I've been camping quite often. During the summer, you get hour after hour of perfect light. It's a dream for nature photography.
Muskoxen have adapted their sleeping pattern to life in tough Arctic conditions. Because night and day are vastly different here depending on the seasons, they need another way of splitting up their time. Instead, they break their time down into 4-hour periods in which they are either awake and active or resting and sleeping. In winter, the sun only shines very briefly in the north. As a result, muskoxen grow a thick undercoat which protects them against extreme cold. With their thick fur coats, they appear even larger. To find food, they head up to the highest mountains. The icy wind blows the snow away here, leaving plants and grass uncovered. Muskoxen can survive in temperatures as low as -50 degrees. Their spiral-shaped nostrils allow them to warm up cold air when they breathe in. In dark Arctic nights or in dazzling snow, their flexible pupils mean they always see well. Their thick undercoat allowed muskoxen to survive the Ice Age too. In spring, when the temperatures begin to rise, they start to sweat profusely. They then shed the undercoat, which leaves them looking pretty shaggy. Aileen Breton is Tord's mother and also spends a lot of time out in the wild. In spring, she goes up into the mountains to look for the undercoats shed by the muskoxen. She has excellent knowledge of the local flora here too.
We will pick these berries here. Then we put them in the freezer. They have more flavor after being frozen. We use them to make juice. And we also make liqueurs from the juice by mixing it with alcohol. We used to live in Kongsvold, and back then we made a lot of liqueur. When our children went to school, the teachers asked them what they did with the berries, and they said, "We make liqueur." And the teachers wondered what kind of parents we were.
Aileen's path takes her along the steep mountain slopes. Especially during the annual thaw, enormous quantities of water gush over the many waterfalls here. The valleys and plateaus become networks of small rivers. Muskox cows come down to the valleys to give birth to their calves in spring. The birch forests provide them and their young good protection as well as peace and quiet, and their buds make for nutritious food. Aileen knows their favorite spots and is hunting for wool in them.
It gets warm in spring, and the undercoat begins to come loose under the ox's belly. And in order to speed up the process, they will go and scratch themselves against a tree. Here you can see the birch trunks, but they wander around scratching themselves on all types of trees. That's how they do it. It's how they shed their wool and change their coats. That's what we call it. It can take between 14 days and 3 weeks for them to shed the whole thing.
Aileen is not alone in looking for this warm wool. Lots of songbirds like thrushes and buntings make their nests cozier using the soft muskoxen wool, which is spread out all over the tundra.
I began collecting wool when we moved to Kongsvold. That was 1975, I think. But back then, there weren't as many oxen, and so we never found much. A bit here and there, and that got us going. Since then, I have been collecting it every year. I have a lot of yarn at home as a result.
Aileen lives with her family on a small farm out in the wilderness. She does not just use her free time to collect wool. She goes fishing and forages for mushrooms and berries. Since she retired as a teacher, she has had more time for her favorite hobby. she processes the wool at home. First of all, it needs to be cleaned.
I remove the black top hairs, the dark hairs. They are rigid and should not end up in the final product. After that, we just have the undercoat. The gray wool that's in this is what we use to knit.
Eileen makes hats, scarves, and gloves from the wool. Muskoxen wool is one of the most delicate fibers in the natural world. No surprise, perhaps, given it has to keep them warm in the Arctic winter.
Muskoxen wool is much warmer than other types. It is about 8 times warmer than any other wool. This is the reason you can make much warmer clothing out of muskoxen wool than from other types.
Eileen uses a 150-year-old spinning wheel to convert the wool into yarn. No other wool provides as much warmth as that of the muskoxen.
Look at muskoxen in winter, and you will see that the wool goes down to cover their toes. This means they are completely covered with wool. Their feet, too. It is no surprise that it is warm and high quality. I love working with this type of wool in particular. It is the most wonderful thing to make things with muskoxen wool. I find it very cozy and warming. Wonderful. Simply lovely.
When the sun goes up at night, it is still extremely cold. The first frost in Härjedaalen comes in August, even if it is quickly banished by the sun's rays. The muskoxen are already up and about. Ida has a visitor. Jonas Stellstrom has come from Oslo to accompany her on a difficult mission. They want to take a helicopter up to the mountains to try to find the wild herd in order to see how they are getting on, and if there are new calves.
What we know from last year is that there are 12 muskoxen here, 10 bulls and 2 mature cows. One of them is Eden, who lived here once and who we released. If no calves have been born, it means the cows were stressed and didn't have enough energy for the mating season. Something has disturbed them, and we need to find out what it was. Was it tourism, or just a bad summer where they did not get enough food? Or was it a stressful winter with lots of encounters with skidoos and skiers?
Even though they both know the summer meadows well, it won't be easy to find the oxen.
Obviously, I hope we get there and find the herd and get to see some new calves from the last 2 years. But my gut instinct says that it's going to be more difficult than we think.
The fact that the herd crossed the border from Norway makes the conservationists' life more difficult. The Swedish authorities don't recognize muskoxen as a native species, which makes it difficult to get funding for protective measures. As a result, Ida and her colleagues work with environmental groups to raise funds for a flight each year. It is the only way to learn what state the wild herd is in. They begin their search from the helicopter.
We will fly over the tree line. You can already see it. Here is the little skarven, and there is the store skarven, and there is the tree line. We will land above it over there. We are very close to the ground. I can see things excellently from here. The shadows on the mountain will make it difficult. It will be easier with a telescope from there. We will fly around it and then go a bit to the south to land.
All right. Vi ses. Samma. Lycka till.
Ida and Jonas did not see any muskoxen from the air.
There are lots of rocks and lots of shadows which look like rocks. Muskoxen have great camouflage. When they lie down, they look like the shadow of a rock. It is difficult terrain for us, but we still very much hope to catch a glimpse of them.
They have until evening to find the oxen. They will need a good strategy.
If we go up to the north, we will have the wind blowing in this direction. We will be kind of walking against the wind. And because they can smell us, this is a good idea so that our scent does not spread too much. Hopefully we will find them before they see us.
The muskoxen have not moved much in the 50 years since they crossed the border here. As long as they have enough food, they don't move around much. It seems they like the rocky terrain and the views into the country next door. It is autumn in Norway. The fjells are now painted in bright colors. The calves are a few months old and are getting more independent. A second survey is underway in Dovrefjell. They are working out exactly how many oxen have survived the summer. Each year, quite a few die from infections. Tord lives at the foot of the mountains. When a muskox dies, he analyzes as much of the carcass as possible. Tord is cleaning and preparing this skull. Some of these are sold, a useful additional source of funding for more conservation measures for the national park. The bigger the horns, the more impressive and expensive the skull.
Muskoxen's horns grow for their whole lives. They start growing when they are 10 months old and then carry on, as you can see with this fully grown female here. The horns are made out of nail tissue, and this is bone. They are very securely mounted. The jagged bone plate on which the horn grows keeps it in the correct position. It is very difficult to break off a horn like this.
Every skull is given a number. This is the 31st ox that perished during the summer.
The skull weighs about 10 kilograms, whereas a cow who does not fight does not need such a thick skull. Theirs will weigh between 3 and 4 kilos. The bulls have much thicker skulls and much bigger horns. When they fight, it is one 400-kilogram bull against another, 60 kilometers an hour. They take a run-up of 30 to 40 meters and then clash heads. The skull needs to be really thick to survive the impact. On a still day, you can hear the crack from up to 4 kilometers away. It is really a very hard crash.
Tord has collected the data from his survey. Even if a few animals have died from infections in the summer, the population is developing in a healthy fashion. However, there are more than 200 animals in the herd, and the management plan has to be stuck to.
It is good to keep the population under control to avoid disease. Sick calves dying slowly is horrible. It is sad.
And so it will be Tord's job to kill some of the oxen in winter.
I've always hunted. Killing an animal in a professional context is just killing, just a job.
Muskoxen were introduced to Norway almost 100 years ago. But their habitat is so small that some of them have to be slaughtered every year in order to protect the herd's long-term future. A little further east, they still have not seen any muskoxen. The herd's size has fluctuated over the years. There were initially 5 members in it. In the 80s, it expanded to 38, before shrinking again, so that there are now only 12 surviving members.
In the past, it was thought incest was the greatest danger, but recent research shows that muskoxen are not particularly susceptible to that. Here in Härjedaalen, the natural world seems to have become less well-balanced. We've forced them into a small area and stressed them.
This makes the 2 conservationists even more determined to protect them, and to go to great lengths to do this.
The best thing about all of this is nature itself. You don't get anything served to you on a plate. Part of the experience is the search.
The border area is a no man's land, and the shy reindeer here are not used to being disturbed. At this time of year, their antlers have grown to their full size. The bulls shed them in autumn, the cows in spring.
Like the muskoxen, they are herd animals. A youngster and a cow are together in a herd, and there is a dominant bull. He will be somewhere near the herd. On top of that, there are bullocks who are on their own and wander around. You see that here too. They are alone.
Ida and Jonas's time is running out. They need to find the muskoxen before darkness descends. There is one last hope.
Behind us is a patch of snow, and the muskoxen like going there to cool off. I can see 2 objects, 2 rocks, but I can see something else. A third thing that could be a muskox lying there.
The camera's zoom lens should clear things up. But it isn't good enough. They are too far away to make anything out clearly. Is this really the herd taking a cooling break on the icy patch of white matter? What is certain is that patches of snow are among their favorite places in summer. Even just standing on the snow with their broad hues will help them lower their core temperature. Even if Ida and Jonas are unable to find the whole herd, they see a bright future.
We have walked around all day in the hope of finding the musk oxen. Unfortunately, it hasn't worked today. We have been up and down the mountain to locate the herd. Then we turn around to look at the mountain and suddenly see something that could be one. I'm not especially optimistic. We are about to go home, but it is a final chance. Really cool.
Obviously, I would love this herd to be able to find peace so that it can recover and begin to grow on its own. But we can't see into the future. We can only hope, but I am optimistic.
Jag ser positivt på det.
In Europe's far north, a survivor of the last ice age has returned. The muskox faces major challenges from human activity and climate change. But this just makes it even more important to protect their remote mountain habitats.